Chapter on The Ardar. Imagine being told to complete a mission that would last a few weeks. Now imagine following that same mission for nearly 30 years. Not because you wanted to, not because you were trapped, but because you believed your country was still waiting for you to finish what you had started. It sounds impossible. It sounds like something invented for a Hollywood screenplay. Yet every major event you're about to hear actually happened. This is the story of Hiroo Onoda, a man who continued fighting World War II long after the rest of the world had moved on. But to understand how that happened, we need to travel back to a very different world, December 1944. The Pacific War had become a nightmare for Japan. Just 3 years earlier, Japanese forces had expanded across Asia with astonishing speed. Island after island had fallen under imperial control. Military leaders believed victory was not only possible, but inevitable. Then everything changed. American industry had awakened. Aircraft carriers rolled out of shipyards faster than Japan could destroy them. New aircraft dominated the skies. Entire islands that had once been considered untouchable were captured one after another. The Japanese empire was slowly collapsing. Every battle became more desperate than the last. Every soldier knew the situation was getting worse, yet surrender was almost unthinkable. Military culture had taught them that honor was worth more than life itself. For many officers, dying in battle was preferable to being captured. It was in the middle of this chaos that a 22-year-old intelligence officer received orders that would define the rest of his existence. His name was Hiroo Onoda. Unlike many soldiers, Onoda had not been trained for suicidal charges. He belonged to a different world: intelligence, observation, sabotage, psychological warfare. His instructors taught him that surviving behind enemy lines was more valuable than dying heroically. Information could win wars. Patience could destroy armies. A single hidden operative could be worth hundreds of soldiers on the battlefield. That philosophy made him different from many of the men around him. He learned to disappear, to wait, to observe, to think. In late December of 1944, he received new orders. His destination was Lubang Island, a small island in the Philippines. On a map, Lubang looked insignificant, a tiny piece of land surrounded by the vast Pacific Ocean. But military planners saw something very different. Its location made it strategically valuable. If American forces secured the island, they could use it to support future operations across the Philippines. Japan wanted to delay that advance for as long as possible. Every day mattered. Every hour mattered. Onoda's assignment sounded simple: destroy enemy infrastructure, prevent aircraft from operating, gather intelligence, remain hidden, never stop resisting. But there was one instruction that stood above all the others. It was delivered personally by Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. An order so powerful that it would echo through nearly 3 decades of history. Under no circumstances are you to surrender. Those words were followed by another promise. No matter how long it takes, we will come back for you. For most soldiers, those sentences would have been nothing more than military motivation. For Hiroo Onoda, they became absolute truth. He accepted them without question. His commander had spoken. That was enough. He boarded a ship and left for Lubang Island, believing he would return home after completing his mission. He never imagined that he was leaving civilization behind. When he finally arrived, the situation was already deteriorating. Japanese forces stationed on the island were exhausted. Supplies were running low. American troops were advancing across the Pacific with overwhelming force. Onoda immediately suggested destroying the island's airfield and harbor before they could be captured. He believed delaying the invasion was still possible. His recommendations were rejected. Senior officers refused. Some believed the battle could still be won. Others simply hesitated. The opportunity disappeared. Only weeks later, American forces landed on Lubang. The battle was short. Japanese defenses collapsed. Most surviving soldiers surrendered. Others were killed. A small number escaped into the dense jungle. Among them, Hiroo Onoda. For the first time in his life, everything he had learned suddenly became real. The jungle became his home. Every sound could mean danger. Every footprint could reveal his position. Every decision could be his last. He was no longer part of an organized army. He was alone. At first, he wasn't completely isolated. 3 other Japanese soldiers eventually joined him. Together, they created a tiny hidden world beneath the jungle canopy. They built crude shelters, collected rainwater, stole rice from nearby farms, hunted whenever they could, moved constantly, never stayed in one place for too long. Their mission remained exactly the same: wait, observe, resist. Eventually, rescue would arrive. At least, that was what they believed. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. No ships appeared. No Japanese reinforcements arrived. Instead, something unexpected began falling from the sky. Pieces of paper, thousands of them. Leaflets scattered across the jungle by aircraft. Printed messages in Japanese. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. Come out. You will not be harmed. For many men, those papers would have meant freedom. For Hiroo Onoda, they meant something entirely different: a trap. He examined every sentence, every word, every detail. Something felt wrong. Why would the enemy suddenly tell the truth? Why would American forces risk helping hidden Japanese soldiers? His intelligence training had prepared him for psychological warfare. Enemy propaganda was expected. False information was expected. Lies were expected. And so he reached a conclusion that would change the rest of his life. The war had not ended. This was only another attempt to trick him into surrendering. He burned the leaflets, stayed hidden, and prepared for another day of war. Without realizing it, World War II had already ended. But for Hiroo Onoda, it was only just beginning. Chapter TWO, a war that existed only in his mind. The first months passed slowly. Every sunrise looked the same. Every night sounded the same. The jungle never truly became quiet. Birds called from the trees. Insects filled the darkness with an endless chorus. Rain arrived without warning, soaking everything the soldiers owned. For Hiroo Onoda and the 3 men hiding beside him, survival became a routine. They slept in makeshift shelters built from branches and leaves. They collected rainwater whenever they could. Food was never guaranteed. Sometimes they hunted wild animals. Sometimes they stole rice from nearby farms under the cover of darkness. Every decision carried risk. Every movement could reveal their position. At first, the 4 men remained optimistic. They believed Japanese forces would eventually return, perhaps in a few weeks, perhaps in a few months. Surely the empire would never abandon them. But as time passed, something began to feel wrong. No ships appeared on the horizon. No Japanese aircraft crossed the sky. No secret messages arrived, only silence. Then came the leaflets. Thousands of pieces of paper drifted through the jungle after American aircraft flew overhead. Printed in Japanese, the message was simple: the war is over. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. Come out. You will not be harmed. One of the younger soldiers stared at the paper for several minutes. What if it's true? No one answered immediately. Finally, Onoda folded the leaflet and looked carefully at every sentence. Something bothered him. The wording seemed unusual. The timing seemed suspicious. Most importantly, it came from the enemy. His instructors had warned him about psychological warfare. An enemy would always try to weaken a soldier before attacking him. Promises, false information, forged documents, anything that could convince a hidden unit to surrender without a fight. To Onoda, the leaflet fit that pattern perfectly. It is propaganda, he finally said. The war continues. The others trusted his judgment. After all, he was the intelligence officer. He had been trained to recognize deception. So they burned the papers. Weeks later, more leaflets appeared. This time, they included photographs, pictures of Japanese cities, families smiling, crowded streets, messages from relatives asking them to come home. Again, doubt spread through the group. Again, Onoda rejected every piece of evidence. If the enemy can print one fake document, he said, they can print 1,000. His logic seemed impossible. Yet inside the jungle, isolated from the rest of the world, it sounded completely reasonable. Every new attempt to convince him became proof that the enemy was becoming more desperate. The Americans weren't trying to rescue him. They were trying to capture him, or so he believed. Months became years. The jungle stopped feeling like a temporary hiding place. It became home. The soldiers learned every river, every mountain trail, every place where food could be found. They repaired their uniforms again and again until almost nothing original remained. Their rifles grew old. Their boots fell apart. Yet every morning, they cleaned their weapons with the same discipline they had learned in the Imperial Japanese Army, because in their minds, the war had never ended. Chapter 3: 30 Years of War. By the late 1940s, the jungle had become more than a hiding place. It had become an entire world. For Hiroo Onoda and the few men who remained beside him, time no longer moved the way it did everywhere else. There were no calendars, no newspapers they could trust, no radio broadcasts they believed, only the changing seasons, the heavy rains, the unbearable heat, and the endless routine of survival. Every morning began the same way. Before sunrise, they quietly inspected their rifles. Even after years of use, the weapons were treated as if they had just left the factory. Every moving part was cleaned. Every bullet counted. Every decision was deliberate. Discipline became their greatest weapon. Without it, they believed they would die. Food was becoming harder to find. Wild pigs and cattle were hunted whenever possible. Rice was stolen from nearby farms under the cover of darkness. Bananas, coconuts, and jungle plants helped keep them alive. Sometimes they ate well. Sometimes they barely ate at all. Each successful meal only delayed the next desperate search. But hunger wasn't their greatest enemy. Loneliness was. The four soldiers rarely spoke about home. Talking about family made the mission feel heavier. Instead, they discussed patrol routes, escape plans, possible enemy movements. Every conversation ended the same way. We just have to wait a little longer. Years passed. Nobody came. Then, in 1949, something happened that shook the group. One of the soldiers, Yuichi Akatsu, could no longer endure the isolation. Months of fear, years without hope. The constant pressure finally broke him. One morning, he disappeared. At first, Onoda believed he had been captured. Days turned into weeks, then months. Eventually, the truth reached the remaining soldiers. Akatsu had surrendered. He was alive. The newspapers celebrated his return. His family welcomed him home. To the outside world, it was an emotional reunion. To Hiroo Onoda, it was proof that Akatsu had failed. He abandoned his mission, Onoda concluded. Nothing else changed. The remaining 3 men continued living exactly as before. The jungle swallowed another year, then another. Search parties arrived from Japan. Some carried loudspeakers. Others carried photographs of family members. Voices echoed through the trees. "Onoda! The war is over! Come home!" Sometimes they even played recordings made by relatives, his brother, his parents, friends. The voices sounded real, almost too real. For a brief moment, even Onoda hesitated. Could it actually be them? But every doubt was crushed by the same conclusion. If the Americans wanted him to surrender, what better way than using familiar voices? His intelligence training refused to let him believe. Everything could be faked. Everything. As the years rolled on, the world outside transformed beyond recognition. Children who had been born after the war graduated from universities. Japan rebuilt its destroyed cities. Factories replaced ruins. The country experienced an economic miracle. Tokyo became one of the most modern cities on Earth. Cars filled the streets. Bullet trains connected entire regions. Television entered millions of homes. The rest of humanity entered the space age. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. 8 years later, Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. The entire planet watched history unfold, except one man. Deep inside the forests of Lubang Island, Hiroo Onoda had no idea any of it had happened. To him, the world was still trapped in 1945. Every strange sound in the distance could only mean one thing: enemy aircraft. Every unfamiliar machine was another weapon. Every civilian was a possible informant. Time itself had stopped. But life inside the jungle became even more dangerous. In 1954, one of Onoda's closest companions, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, was killed during an exchange of gunfire with local authorities. The small group was now reduced to only 2 men. Years later, another tragedy followed. In October 1972, Kenshichi Kozuka, who had spent nearly 28 years hiding alongside Onoda, was shot and killed during a confrontation with Philippine police while the pair attempted to burn harvested rice as part of what they still believed was sabotage against enemy forces. For the first time since arriving on Lubang, Hiroo Onoda was completely alone. 28 years had passed. His uniform was nothing more than patched fabric. His boots had been repaired countless times. His rifle, remarkably, still worked. He continued cleaning it every single day. Every morning, he woke up believing his commander would eventually return. Every night, he fell asleep, convinced he had fulfilled his duty. He had become a ghost, a soldier forgotten by history, yet still fighting a war that no longer existed. Little did he know, on the other side of the ocean, a young Japanese traveler was about to make a decision that would change both of their lives forever. His name was Norio Suzuki, and unlike every search team before him, he wasn't looking for a soldier, he was looking for a legend. Chapter 4. The man, WHO, went looking, FORA, Jost. By the early 1970s, Hiroo Onoda had become more than a missing soldier. He had become a mystery. For decades, Japanese authorities believed he was dead. Search teams had come and gone. Families had grieved. New generations had grown up hearing stories about the officer who vanished into the Philippine jungle and was never seen again. To most people, the mystery was over. If Onoda had survived the war, surely he had died long ago. But one young man refused to believe that. His name was Norio Suzuki. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a historian. He wasn't sent by the Japanese government. He was simply an adventurous traveler with an unusual dream. Before leaving Japan, Suzuki told his friends he wanted to find 3 things: the real Hiroo Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman. People laughed. They assumed he was joking. Finding a man who had been missing for nearly 30 years sounded as impossible as finding the mythical Yeti. Yet Suzuki believed that if Onoda was still alive, he would still be in the jungle, still following orders, still waiting. So, in early 1974, carrying little more than a backpack, basic camping equipment, and an incredible amount of optimism, Suzuki traveled to Lubang Island. Unlike every military search team before him, he did something completely different. He didn't bring soldiers. He didn't carry loudspeakers. He didn't fly aircraft overhead. He simply walked. Day after day, he wandered through the dense forest, quietly calling one name: Onoda. I'm Japanese. I've come to see you. Nothing happened. The jungle answered only with birds and insects. Then, one afternoon, movement. A figure emerged between the trees, thin, bearded, wearing a faded Imperial Japanese Army uniform held together by decades of careful repairs. His rifle rested firmly in his hands. His boots looked as old as the trees surrounding him. For a moment, neither man spoke. They simply stared at each other. Suzuki could hardly believe what he was seeing. The impossible had become reality. Standing in front of him was Hiroo Onoda, still alive, still armed, still at war. Suzuki slowly introduced himself. I'm Japanese. I came to find you. To his surprise, Onoda smiled. It was the first friendly face from his homeland he had seen in almost 30 years. The 2 men spent hours talking. Suzuki explained everything. Japan had surrendered in 1945. The emperor had announced the end of the war. The country had rebuilt. Tokyo was now one of the largest cities on earth. Millions of Japanese people were living peaceful lives. Onoda listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. But when Suzuki finished, he quietly shook his head. I cannot surrender. Suzuki looked confused. You've just heard the truth. The war is over. Onoda answered with complete calm. My commander ordered me never to surrender. I will obey that order until he personally releases me. To anyone else, it sounded absurd. But to Onoda, it was the only logical answer. An order had started his mission. Only another order could end it. Suzuki understood something that nobody else had understood before. He wasn't dealing with a man who refused reality. He was dealing with a soldier who had never stopped being a soldier. His loyalty had become stronger than time itself. Suzuki returned to Japan with astonishing news. Hiroo Onoda was alive. The entire country was stunned. Newspapers rushed to print the story. Television stations interrupted programming. A man missing for nearly 3 decades had just been found. But the story wasn't over. There was only one person capable of ending the longest military mission in modern history: Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, the same officer who had given Onoda his final orders in December of 1944. Nearly 30 years had passed. Taniguchi was no longer an active officer. He had become an ordinary civilian. Yet history was about to call him back one last time. When officials contacted him, he agreed immediately. There was no hesitation. If Hiroo Onoda had truly remained faithful to his orders for all those years, then he deserved to hear the truth from the very man who had sent him into the jungle. In March 1974, Taniguchi traveled to Lubang Island, carrying no weapon, only a document, and 30 years of history. The moment they finally stood face to face, time seemed to disappear. The old commander looked at the soldier who had obeyed him for nearly 3 decades. His uniform was worn. His face was older, his body thinner, but his posture remained perfectly disciplined. Taniguchi unfolded the official orders. His voice was steady. The Imperial Army has ceased all combat operations. You are relieved of your duty. For several seconds, neither man moved. The words echoed through the jungle. The mission was finally over. Onoda slowly removed his cap. His shoulders relaxed for the first time in almost 30 years. The war had finally ended. Chapter 5. He End Of He Longest Mission. On March 9, 1974, the longest mission in modern military history finally came to an end. For nearly 30 years, Hiroo Onoda had lived by a single promise. He had obeyed every order, protected every bullet, maintained every weapon, and waited for a commander who, in his mind, had never forgotten him. Now, that commander stood before him once again. Major Yoshimi Taniguchi folded the official document and looked directly into Onoda's eyes. There was no celebration, no applause, no dramatic speech, only silence, the kind of silence that can only exist after decades of waiting. Slowly, Hiroo Onoda raised his rifle one final time. It was the same Arisaka Type 99 rifle he had carried since the Second World War, a weapon that had survived tropical storms, years of humidity, countless patrols, and nearly 3 decades hidden beneath the jungle canopy. To everyone's surprise, it still worked. The rifle was clean, perfectly maintained, just as military regulations required. Then, Onoda removed his ammunition pouch, his bayonet, his sword. One by one, he placed them on the ground. The mission was over. The war he had carried inside his mind for 29 years had finally ended. For the first time since 1944, he was no longer a soldier. He was simply a man. News of his surrender spread around the world within hours. Newspapers across Europe, the United States, Australia, and Japan placed his photograph on their front pages. People couldn't believe it. How could someone remain at war for nearly 30 years? How could one man ignore every newspaper, every radio broadcast, every search party, every piece of evidence? The answer wasn't madness. It was something much more complicated. Absolute discipline, absolute loyalty, and complete isolation. Everything Onoda experienced reinforced the belief that he was doing exactly what his country expected of him. Every search team became another trick. Every leaflet became enemy propaganda. Every attempt to rescue him became proof that he should remain hidden. His world had become a closed system. Nothing from outside could enter. Nothing inside could leave. When he finally returned to Japan, he discovered a country he barely recognized. The villages he remembered had become cities. Traditional wooden houses had given way to skyscrapers. Highways crossed places where dirt roads once existed. People carried portable radios. Televisions filled store windows. Children played electronic games. The Japan he had left behind no longer existed. In many ways, he had become a visitor in his own homeland. Thousands of people welcomed him. Some called him a hero. Others questioned the violence committed during his years in hiding when he and his companions raided farms and exchanged gunfire with local residents. The debate continues even today. Can someone be admired for extraordinary loyalty while also being held accountable for the harm caused by that loyalty? History rarely offers simple answers. Onoda himself never claimed to be a hero. He simply said he had followed orders, exactly as he had been trained to do. Years later, he moved to Brazil, where he worked as a cattle rancher before eventually returning to Japan. He dedicated much of his later life to working with young people, believing that discipline, resilience, and purpose were values worth passing on to future generations. He died on January 16, 2014, at the age of 91. By then, the world had changed beyond recognition. The internet connected billions of people. Satellites circled the earth. Humanity carried computers in their pockets. Yet the story of Hiroo Onoda continued to fascinate historians, psychologists, military experts, and ordinary people alike. Because his story isn't really about war. It's about belief, about duty, about the incredible power of the human mind to shape reality. Most of us think history is written by generals, kings, and presidents. But sometimes, history is remembered because of one ordinary person who made one extraordinary decision and never stopped believing in it. Hiroo Onoda spent almost 30 years waiting for an order that finally arrived. When it did, he obeyed it immediately, just as he had obeyed every order before. Perhaps that is why his story still resonates today. Not because he was the last soldier to surrender, but because he reminds us of a question that still matters. How far would you go if you truly believed you were doing the right thing? Thank you for watching. If you enjoy true stories that sound like fiction but are completely real, consider subscribing, because history is filled with extraordinary people, and this is only the beginning.